From lotus silk to stone crab claws. From eels in Japan to leather in Tuscany. We search the earth to discover the stories behind some of the most valuable items. Our first stop is the forests of Southeast Asia, where one of the world's most expensive raw materials grows.
For thousands of years, agarwood has been known as the wood of the gods. First-grade agarwood can cost as much as $100,000 per kilogram, making it one of the most expensive raw materials in the world. But for this tree to produce any agarwood, it must first become infected with mold. So how does this infection process work? What is agarwood used for? And what makes it so valuable? Aquilaria malacensis is a tree native to the rainforests of Southeast Asia. Prior to infection, the healthy heartwood inside Aquilaria trees is pale, odourless, and worthless. However, in the wild, damage to the tree by external forces, such as grazing animals, sporadically results in the growth of a specific type of fungal infection inside the tree, called Phyllophora parasitica. The Aquilaria's defense to this attack is to produce a stress-induced aromatic resin, called aloes, which is dark and moist. Over the course of several years, the aloes slowly embed into the heartwood to create agarwood.
Với kinh nghiệm của những người đi rừng á, thì thường người ta đến cái cây đó, người ta nhìn vào, người ta có thể đoán được là cái con kiến nó đục vào cái lỗ đấy. Rồi khi nó đục vào là nó gây cái vết thương, rồi nó trú ngụ ra vào, rồi nó đem những cái vi sinh vật hoặc cái vi khuẩn hoặc các bào tử nấm ở các nơi nó đem vào. Thì cái cây đó, cái con kiến nó ở trong con kiến nó có một cái chất dịch ở trong con kiến, nó tiết ra, nó làm cho cái vết thương nó tổn thương, thì cái gió nó mới đưa nhựa nó bao lại, lâu ngày nó thành trầm.
Once agarwood is harvested, it needs to be separated from the healthy Aquilaria wood around it. In a painstaking task that often takes hours, resin-infused chips, also known as oud, are carved out by hand. Oud chips are commonly used as incense, particularly in the Middle East, where they're burnt both as tokens of hospitality and infused into clothes and garments as a perfume.
Khi đốt lên đầu tiên là mình thấy cái khói nó lên trước, rồi có cái mùi hương thơm nó tỏa ra. Thơm nó tỏa ra cái mùi rất là thơm đặc trưng của trầm hương, không có cái hương nào bằng nó hết. Rồi sau đó nó mới từ từ nó có cái mùi ngọt dịu lại, mà nó kéo dài có thể là 5-3 tiếng đồng hồ nếu trong phòng kín.
Oud is also distilled into an essential oil, and in its purest form, aged oud oil can cost up to $80,000 per litre, earning the nickname amongst traders of liquid gold. As its popularity continues to grow in the West, oud has become a common ingredient in several high-value fragrances, adding a warm, musky aroma. But due to unsustainable production and poaching, all varieties of Aquilaria trees are now classified as critically endangered, with experts estimating the global population has declined by 80% over the last 150 years. Even for those surviving Aquilaria trees, the frequency of natural fungal infection is extremely low. Some estimates say only 2% of wild Aquilaria trees are adequately infected to produce agarwood naturally, meaning the hunt to find natural agarwood is extremely arduous.
Rồi cái tốp đấy chẳng hạn 5 người, 10 người đi có thể là đi 15-20 ngày, nhưng mà khi mà có trầm ngày nào, sớm ngày nào thì về ngày đấy thôi. Có khi đi thì cũng chẳng có đâu. Có khi đi cả 10 mấy 20 hôm về cũng chẳng có gì hết. Rất là nguy hiểm. Nào là mưa, gió, đèo, núi, rồi thú rừng, rắn rết đủ thứ. Nên bỏ mạng là trong rừng là chuyện thường thôi. Cái thời đó là bỏ mạng là chuyện thường. Bây giờ không còn trầm nữa, hết rồi. Bây giờ trong rừng là không còn trầm. Tức là cái dân mình đã khai thác tận hết là không còn nữa.
With natural agarwood now bordering on extinction, in some forestries, like this one, managed by Truong in Vietnam, trees are artificially inoculated with a microbial compound to induce the all-important resin.
Trầm tự nhiên thì dân gian mình thường nói là nó trong thiên nhiên nó hiếm, nó khó, nên là họ chuộng. Nhưng sự thực nếu mà nói về cái chất lượng trầm nhân tạo với trầm thiên nhiên thì bây giờ chưa chắc trầm nhân tạo đã thua trầm thiên nhiên. Đúng, trầm tự nhiên bây giờ giá trị còn rất là cao, chẳng hạn như nó có thể gấp 100 lần cái trầm nhân tạo. Vì cái trầm tự nhiên á, là bây giờ nó không còn nữa, nên người ta có muốn đưa cái giá nào vẫn được. Còn cái trầm nhân tạo là dân gian người ta biết là cái này làm từ con người mà ra, nên tự đánh cái giá nó thấp xuống.
Agarwood was described as a fragrant product of wealth and luxury in one of the world's oldest written texts, the Sanskrit Vedas, dating back as early as 1400 BC. The aroma produced from agarwood has been highly valued by many cultures and religions throughout history. In the Nirvana Sutra, aloes is mentioned as a heavenly wood used in the cremation of Buddha. In the New Testament, Jesus' body was anointed with a mixture of myrrh and aloes following his crucifixion. And in the Sahih al-Bukhari hadith, the description of paradise by Allah's messenger includes the burning of agarwood as incense. The global market for agarwood is estimated to be worth a staggering $32 billion. But where oud was once so common, high demand has not only increased the price, but also the rate of harvesting and artificial production. By the end of 2029, the market is expected to double to $64 billion.
Theo tôi cái kinh nghiệm lâu năm thì cái trầm hương này không có mai một đâu. Trầm hương sau này nó là một cái vật sản quý giá cho đất nước đấy. Vì cái này là nguồn cung có khi không đủ cầu đâu. Vì tất cả các thế giới này trên thế giới bây giờ hầu như họ tập trung vào cái ngành trầm hương hết. Từ thượng vàng hạ cám chẳng hạn như là tinh dầu đến trầm rồi đến hương nhang đấy, rồi tiện chuỗi hạt đeo tay, vòng đeo cổ đấy, nó không có mai một đâu. Nhưng mà có cái là bây giờ trước tiên sợ dân mình không có vốn để đầu tư thôi.
Lotus silk is one of the rarest fabrics in the world. Produced only in small scale across Cambodia, Myanmar, and more recently Vietnam, this natural fibre is only extracted by a few skilled craftspeople across the world. But making this silk isn't easy. Extracting enough lotus silk for one scarf can take 2 months, and the final product can cost 10 times as much as regular silk. So just how is it made? And what makes it so expensive? Phan Thi Thuan's family have been making silk for generations, growing and harvesting the threads from silkworms themselves to create luxury garments. But making lotus silk is different. Silk usually comes from silkworms. They're kept on wide trays and need to be fed almost 24 hours a day with mulberry leaves. The caterpillars delicately spin threads to create their cocoons, and it can take hundreds of silkworms to make a kilo of silk. But while the insects require careful looking after, they do most of the hard work themselves. The key difference between the bright yellow silk and the paler lotus version is that every single strand of lotus silk must be extracted by hand.
Tơ sen thì nó khác với cái lụa tơ tằm. Là tơ sen thì mình phải rút sợi tơ nó là thân mộc. Mà sợi tơ tằm kia nó có cái phần cứng hơn cái sợi tơ sen là vì nó nhờ vào cái nực của con tằm, nó qua một cái tuyến keo của nó rút từ ruột nó ra, cái là nó có cái phần mềm mại mà có một chút co giãn. Còn tơ tằm thì nó bóng, sang trọng. Tơ sen là quý phái.
Each thread of lotus silk starts with the stem of the lotus flower. The lotus is Vietnam's national flower and a plant that's grown across the country. While this fabric has been made for years in Myanmar, Phan Thi Thuan only started experimenting with this fibre in 2017.
Với chúng tôi thì tất cả đất nước Việt Nam, nhân dân Việt Nam là ai cũng rất là quý cái bông hoa sen. Tất cả nước chúng tôi là rất là nhiều người trồng sen. Nhưng mà bao giờ cũng chỉ có thu hoa sen, thu hạt sen thôi. Còn cuống sen là vứt ra nó rất là bẩn. Khi mà người ta gợi ý cho tôi làm tơ sen thì tôi thấy có lợi cho nhân dân, cho nông dân thì tôi nghĩ là tôi có khả năng làm được thì tôi sẽ quyết tâm tôi làm.
Once the stem is selected and picked by hand, the silk inside can be extracted. Each stem contains a minuscule amount of thin, sticky fibres, which must be rolled together and dried. The threads need to be processed within 24 hours while they're still wet, otherwise they'll break, and so harvesting has to be done each day. And the lotus plants are only available to harvest between April and October. Once you've gone through the hard work of extracting these fibres, they're incredibly delicate too.
Bước đầu là tôi chưa nghĩ đến làm tơ sen, thì tôi nghĩ là tơ sen thì nó mỏng manh mà làm thì nó rất nhiều công. Sợi tơ tằm thì nó dai hơn cho nên là có thể dệt được bằng máy, còn sợi tơ sen thì nó không có độ dai như sợi sợi tơ tằm cho nên là phải dệt bằng tay. Cái thời gian của cái việc nấy sợi là lâu nhất. Còn khi mà đã nấy được sợi rồi, cho vào máy dệt rồi thì nó cũng nhanh hơn nhiều, bởi vì tất cả bao nhiêu công đoạn mới được nấy được sợi thì một người lao động làm một ngày được 200 đến 250 cuống sen. Còn cái khăn rộng 36 cm, dài 1m75 thì hết 9.200 cuống sen. Thì một người phải làm một cái khăn đấy là phải mất 2 tháng mới được một cái khăn.
Once dried, these threads are carefully weighed down and delicately hand-spooled. Then they're put into the loom. These fibres are fragile, but once woven can be as durable as traditional silk. Fan has a team of 20 workers creating these fibres each day, allowing them to produce 10 to 20 scarves each month. But when a 25cm scarf can sell for just over $200, the hard work is worth it. The final product is unlike any other fibre. It's soft like silk, breathable like linen, and slightly elastic. These luxurious traits have made it popular with tourists searching for rare souvenirs. It's also recently been picked up by international fashion brands searching for a new luxury fibre. But its scale has been limited, as there are still few trained in the making of these silk threads. But despite the work involved, Phan Thi Thuan is hoping that this skill could one day grow to become a larger industry.
Tôi dạy rất là nhiều, nhưng mà dạy những người lớn tuổi cũng nhiều. Những người lớn tuổi họ sẽ không có cái sự sáng tạo, không có đam mê, mà không có cái làm thì nhanh bằng những thế hệ trẻ. Cho nên là 2 năm 19, 20 này là tôi đã dùng các em học sinh trong những dịp nghỉ hè là tôi dạy các em ấy. Mỗi năm là dạy 100 em. Thì là nhìn thì cái thế hệ tương lai đấy nó mới phát triển được tơ sen của chúng tôi. Nhưng mà tôi chỉ mong là nhân dân Việt Nam và những thế hệ mai sau nó sẽ giỏi hơn chúng tôi, để nó sẽ có những cái cách làm khác đi thì nó sẽ làm được nhiều hơn, nhanh hơn.
The unmistakable sound of the gong has held spiritual significance in Southeast Asia for centuries. Hand-beaten from sheet materials, the labour-intensive shaping and delicate paintwork result in beautiful percussive instruments. Souvenir gongs can be bought for just a few dollars, but large, finely tuned gongs made from the best materials can fetch tens of thousands of dollars. So what are gongs actually used for, and why are they so expensive? This is Thailand's Gong Highway, a 21-mile stretch of road that is home to more than 50 family-owned gong companies, who collectively produce roughly 7,000 gongs each year. In the heart of the Gong Highway is Bunrak Sisinaha's workshop. As a third-generation gong maker, Bunrak has been studying and practicing gong making for almost 50 years.
ชอบทำคล้องติดตามการทำคล้องพ่อและปู่ย่าตายายมาตั้งแต่เล็กๆตั้งแต่6 ขวบครับจนปัจจุบันนี่แหละครับก็ชอบการทำคล้องเพราะว่ารักในการงานอาชีพงานฝีมือหรือว่างานแฮนด์เมดนะครับเป็นงานที่ยากก็ว่าได้จะว่าง่ายก็ได้สำหรับคนที่เป็นนะครับ
The process begins by cutting the sheet material into a circle. No materials go to waste here. Even the offcuts are used to make the largest shape possible. It's at this early stage where the eventual cost of each gong is determined.
ความถูกความแพงนี่นะว่าเราต้องการใบเล็กใบใหญ่หรือว่าต้องการวัตถุดิบครับถ้าวัตถุดิบเป็นเนื้อเหล็กมันก็จะถูกถ้าต้องการแพงกว่านั้นนิดหน่อยก็เป็นเนื้อสแตนดาร์ดถ้าต้องการที่มีคุณภาพสูงสุดก็มีคุณค่าก็จะเป็นเนื้อทองเหลืองครับ
Once the edges have been smoothed, a welder attaches the sides. This flat dish is then ready to be hammered into shape. The gongs made here in Thailand are of the bossed variety, where a centre knob is surrounded by smaller nipples. This design is stencilled on the back of the gong with a homemade compass, and bangers begin to hammer out the shape. The bangers use templates engraved into tree stumps that allow the knob and nipples to be hammered out fully and evenly. Then comes the hardest part, the tuning. Tuners observe and train for years to master their skill. He strikes the gong in different places and listens for acoustic imperfections. Using a mallet to make slight alterations, he continues this process, hoping to reduce dissonance in the sound frequencies emitted from the gong.
ทักษะเนี่ยเราจะรู้ว่าเสียงคล้องจะทำยังไงให้มันดังครับแล้วจุดไหนที่มันไพเราะจุดไหนที่เสียงกังวานเราต้องรู้ครับต้องรู้ว่าจะตกแต่งตรงไหนดีบางเจ้าเขาชอบเสียงสูงก็ตามเหมือนกับคอร์ดเสียงแต่ได้เสียง
Once satisfied with the sound, the gong is coated in enamel, ready for intricate artworks to be hand-painted. Bunlak's workshop produces gongs of all different shapes and designs, including specially made gongs which can sell for up to 1 million baht, or around $33,000.
คือพิเศษเนี่ยคือเป็นคล้องใหญ่ครับที่ลูกค้าเขาสั่งเป็นพิเศษว่าต้องการเอาไปเป็นอนุสรณ์หรือเป็นแบบว่าเป็นวัดไหนที่มีชื่อเสียงเขาชอบเอาไปให้นักท่องเที่ยวชมว่าคล้องเนี่ยต้องการคล้องใหญ่พิเศษแล้วก็ลายที่สวย
The cultural significance of gongs is clear to see in Ubon Ratchathani, a major city at one end of the Gong Highway, where the world's largest gong towers stand proudly next to the Wat Tam Kua Sawan Temple. The use of gongs is deeply ingrained in Buddhism, and according to the Tourism Authority of Thailand, the Gong Highway is responsible for supplying most of the country's 30,000 Buddhist temples with their gongs. So what about the rest of the world? In the West, gongs have become commonplace, not only in popular culture, but also in meditation studios and symphony orchestras. The largest non-Asian gong manufacturer is Paisti, based in Germany. It's been producing gongs since 1906, and its largest gong, an 80-inch symphonic model, retails for around $27,000. This type of flat-face gong, sometimes referred to as a tam-tam, gives more of a crash sound, which is different from the tuned tones of a bossed gong. Paisti's method for producing gongs are more scientific than those on the Gong Highway, with acoustic testing equipment used to evaluate the gong's frequency. But the quality and traditional craftsmanship at Bunlak's workshop is clear to see, and the historical importance of the gong is felt throughout Southeast Asia.
ไม่ว่าจะเป็นงานวันเกิดงานแต่งงานกองบวชงานประเพณีต่างๆครับในวัฒนธรรมไทยนี่นะครับไม่ว่าจะเป็นงานกฐินใช่ไหมครับงานผ้าป่าอย่างเงี้ยเขาทำหรือคนเขาอยากทำบุญสะเดาะเคราะห์พวกนี้เขาก็ซื้อไปถวายวัดครับคือเสียงกังวานนะครับกังวานแล้วก็เสียงยาวแล้วก็ตีไปเนี่ยรู้สึกกังวานในหัวใจซึ้งในเสียงว่ามันเสียงเป็นเสียงบอกบุญนะครับเสียงบอกบุญคือเสียงคล้องนี่เป็นเสียงบอกบุญเป็นสัญญาณ
This is a Dong Tao chicken, often known as dragon chickens. These thick-legged birds can sell for over $2,000. Each one can take years of raising and special care, and the best are even entered into beauty competitions across Vietnam. So what does it take to raise a Dong Tao chicken, and why are they so expensive? Dong Tao is a rare breed, exclusive to one small village on the outskirts of Hanoi. Giang Tuan Vu is a third-generation Dong Tao chicken farmer. He's been looking after these birds for over 20 years.
Thì mình đã chăn nuôi nó 20 năm. Từ những lúc còn rất là nhỏ, học tiểu học, học lớp 5 thì mình đã yêu thích nó. Vì mình cũng rất là may mắn hơn mọi người là ông ngoại và ông nội của mình đều là những người rất nổi tiếng với con gà này. Còn nếu mà phát triển quy mô lớn hơn thì trong khoảng 10 năm nay thì mình đã xây dựng trang trại và chăn nuôi nó với quy mô lớn hơn. Cái lý do mà mình yêu thích cái sản phẩm, cái lý do mà mình yêu thích cái con gà đông tảo này thì mình nghĩ là bắt nguồn bản thân mình là một người Đông Tảo. Ngày xưa thì xã Đông Tảo rất là nhỏ, nó chỉ có 2-3 nghìn dân thôi. Đấy, mà nó sở hữu riêng một giống gà riêng mà không có vùng đất nào khác ở Việt Nam có.
The majority of these chickens are still raised in Dong Tao village. While the exact origins of the breed are unknown, they've been around for hundreds of years and were thought to be bred originally for cockfighting due to their thick and strong legs. These days, the birds are a more decorative breed that's often eaten for its unique meat.
Ngay đầu tiên khi mà mình nhìn thấy cái miếng thịt gà Đông Tảo thì cái màu sắc của nó sẽ có màu sậm hơn. Nó giống như cái màu của thịt bò. Nó khác biệt hoàn toàn so với các giống gà khác. Nó có một cái chất lượng thịt thơm ngon mà không loại gà nào ở Việt Nam có được.
The dramatic look of Dong Tao chickens means that they've been important gifts for years. Originally presented to royalty, they're now reserved for special occasions such as Tet, Vietnamese New Year.
Nếu như có những con gà miếu có thể phải tuyển chọn hàng trăm nghìn con mới được một con. Có thể nuôi hàng trăm con gà giống bình thường mới tuyển được một cặp gà bố mẹ. Sau khi đó chúng tôi sẽ phải tuyển ra những con gà con của những con gà đó và tuyển chọn qua nhiều giai đoạn khác nhau. Giai đoạn 1 tháng tuổi, giai đoạn 5 tháng tuổi và giai đoạn trưởng thành. Mỗi năm trang trại của chúng tôi thì thường sẽ để lại từ 500 đến 700 con để tuyển chọn các cái sản phẩm cho các dịp Tết. Thì trong số đó tôi chỉ có thể tuyển chọn từ khoảng 3 đến 5% là đạt các tiêu chí để bán quà tặng cho dịp Tết. Số còn lại thì chúng tôi sẽ bán theo diện gà thương phẩm từ 200 đến 500 nghìn một cân.
That means that from the 500 chicks, just 15 could qualify to be sold as gifts. So what are the criteria that these chickens need to meet to be worth thousands of dollars?
Những cái đặc điểm khác biệt của một con gà đắt tiền nó nằm ở các yếu tố về chân tay, hình thể, và một điều nữa đó là nó sẽ được chăm sóc một cách đặc biệt mà nó không có một con gà nào khác được chăm sóc như vậy. Từ việc rửa chân, ăn chế độ riêng, phơi nắng có cái thời gian nhất định trong ngày. Một con gà loại A sẽ có một đôi chân dòng chân đỏ vảy thịt, có kích thước chân lớn và cái hình thức bên ngoài, các yếu tố về hình thức bên ngoài trọn vẹn. Ví dụ như là trọng lượng lớn từ 4,5 cân đến 5 kg và cái hình thái nó cao to và nó có hình thái oai phong.
When preparing the chickens for sale or competition, a lot of work goes into looking after them. And roughly a month before, they're fed a special high-protein diet and their legs are washed gently in a mixture of tea and salt. Physical appearance isn't all about the feet either. Every part of their look is equally important when it comes to grading, from symmetrical wattles and earlobes to uniformly covered shiny black feathers.
Thứ hạng gà thì nó sẽ quyết định là cái độ hiếm của con gà đó và cũng từ đó nó quyết định cái giá trị của con gà đó. Một con gà thứ hạng cao thì nó sẽ có giá trị rất là cao. Đặc biệt có những con gà mình đã bán với giá $2.000.
While many of the birds are sold off around the holidays for their meat, the really high-value chickens are often kept by the farmers and entered into beauty contests. The longer the chickens live, the larger their features, and so grade A Dong Tao chicken could live for 6 or 7 years.
Việc tuyển chọn và chăn nuôi một con gà để mang đi dự thi cũng được diễn ra rất cầu kỳ. Cái kinh nghiệm này nó truyền từ đời này qua đời khác. Từ việc ăn uống chế độ ra sao, phơi nắng bao nhiêu tiếng một ngày, ăn những loại thực phẩm nào để tốt cho phần nào thì cũng được truyền lại từ các cụ ngày xưa rất là nhiều.
While the chicken's popularity is mostly still contained to Vietnam, interest around the world is growing. And in April 2018, 802 Dong Tao chicken eggs were seized by police at Ataturk Airport in Istanbul after they were found being smuggled into the country in a custom-made suitcase. These eggs were valued by police at $2,000 each and show that no matter the price these chickens reach, there will always be those willing to pay.
Coconuts have been cultivated in tropical climates for thousands of years, and they produce some of the most expensive cooking oil. Coconut oil can sell for around 12 times the price of canola oil when you compare leading brands. The industry is predicted to grow by $500 million worldwide over the next 4 years. But with the hotly contested health benefits some coconut oil companies promote, should it be as expensive as it is? So what's the truth behind coconut oil? And why is it so expensive? Its supposed versatility is the reason for its high price. While coconut has a long tradition of use in food and medicine across Asia, its oil is the most valuable byproduct. Here in the Philippines, where over 44% of the world's coconut oil is produced, coconut trees thrive in a long, dry season. But even with a bounty of coconuts at your fingertips, assuming you can climb high enough, the process of extracting the oil isn't easy. Each coconut has a layer of husk surrounding its shell that must be removed by hand. Only then can it be cleaved in half with a special tool called a bolo knife.
So after grating mo na tong ato na siyang pugon using our expeller machine. Then human sa expeller, so nakakolekta na ta sa cream. Ang cream ato siyang i-ferment for 12 hours sa usa ka table. I-set nato siya diha for 12 hours.
In the Philippines, 14.8 million metric tons of coconuts were harvested in 2019 alone. And these were used to make around 1.6 million metric tons of oil, much of it exported to the US or Europe. And by the time the coconut oil reaches the Western market, the price for the product will have roughly doubled. Even with the ideal growing conditions for the trees, coconut oil has grown so popular that farmers in the Philippines struggle to meet the demand. In recent years, the market for coconut oil has surged in the West alongside a cultural shift towards the search for natural, unprocessed products. And coconut oil manufacturers were quick to capitalize on the sensation. Consumption peaked in the US in 2009 at 598,000 metric tons, and coconut oil quickly became the mascot for a healthy lifestyle as celebrities and bloggers adopted the product. Proponents of coconut oil as a cure-all remedy say that it can promote weight loss, improve blood sugar, and even slow the progression of Alzheimer's because of its high levels of antioxidants. But so far, all scientific studies on the health benefits of coconut oil have been inconclusive, and nutritionists remain skeptical. Some nutritionists say coconut oil could actually do more harm than good. Coconut oil is composed of 80% to 90% saturated fatty acid. In 2017, the American Heart Association issued an advisory against saturated fats and specifically warned that coconut oil increases cholesterol and should be avoided. And soon after, the wholesale price of coconut oil dropped by more than half. But it's a dip that hasn't lasted, and coconut oil's price is once again rising rapidly. The oil has become a key ingredient in many products, perhaps most recently alternative meats. Both Beyond and Impossible burgers are reliant on coconut oil, and their surging popularity has increased demand. But while coconut oil's popularity shows no sign of slowing, there's a looming problem for the coconut supply. Some estimates say as many as 90% of all coconut trees in Asia are nearing the end of their productive cycle. The majority of coconut plantations across the Philippines were planted 40 or 50 years ago, and many of the trees are now producing as little as 10 coconuts a year, rather than the 100 to 150 a healthy tree might.
So 250 ka lubi makahimo ta og 10 liters of virgin coconut oil. So kani nga lubi gikuha nit nato sa 12 ka punuan nga lubi. So ang lubi nga inani nga mo mature ato na siyang harvest on every 3 months or quarterly.
And the 10 liters that come from all of these coconuts would only fill up about 21 16-ounce jars of coconut oil that you'd likely find at a supermarket. Given it takes about 10 years for a new coconut tree to fruit, planting new trees is going to be crucial to keep up with this soaring demand. But despite these problems, the market is poised to grow by $518 million before 2024. Sen Mai is a traditional Vietnamese form of lacquer painting, created using a toxic lacquer harvested from one region of the country. It requires months of application and sanding back layers of paint to build up the image. Last year, a Sen Mai painting sold at auction for $972,000. So what makes these paintings so special? And why are they so expensive?
Là khi hoàn thành một cái bức tranh sơn mài truyền thống là bao giờ gần như không nhìn thấy cái họa tiết gì ở phía dưới. Thế thì trong quá trình họa sĩ mài, tức là lúc vẽ, bắt đầu moi dần nó ra, hình dần dần lên, màu dần dần lên. Nên nó tạo cho họa sĩ một cái sự hồi hộp để mà đi đến cái đích cuối cùng của mình, thì cái đấy rất nhiều họa sĩ thích cái cảm giác đó.
Pham Chinh Trung has dedicated almost 50 years to mastering Sen Mai and knows how equally tiring and rewarding the craft can be. It is an art form of incredible value in Vietnamese culture for both the time and skill it requires and the exclusive natural materials needed to make it. The process of making lacquer paint begins in the forests of Vietnam, where planters collect resin from a toxic wax tree native to Southeast Asia called the Rus succedanea. Planters must cut into more than 400 trees to retrieve between 1 and 1.5 kilograms of resin.
Cây sơn sẽ trồng khoảng 3 năm thu hoạch, sau đó thì sẽ thu hoạch 4 đến 5 năm. Để thu hoạch được nhựa cây thì chúng tôi sẽ phải bắt đầu vào 4 giờ sáng. Cắt nhựa, dùng vỏ con trai để đựng nhựa cây và khoảng tầm 3 đến 4 tiếng sau thì thu hoạch.
After harvesting, the lacquer must be removed of any impurities and mixed for several hours before it's suitable for painting. One of the principal features of Sen Mai is the depth created by adding several layers of paint and sanding them back. These layers aren't always visible in the finished work, but are what differentiate lacquer painting from other common painting styles. With oil painting, artists paint from back to front, painting the landscape first and the details later. The process of lacquer painting is the opposite.
Hai cái nó ngược nhau một chút. Và chính vì cái chi tiết vẽ trước toàn cảnh vẽ chùm lên thì khi xong tranh thì coi như là không nhìn thấy cái gì ở dưới nữa. Và mài dần dần các cái chi tiết nó mới nổi dần lên. Bởi vì mài lúc bấy giờ mới hồi hộp xem hình thì không khó có thể sai được rồi. Nhưng mà chất liệu mình dùng như thế nó ra có hợp không? Sắc độ có đủ không? Đúng không? Độ đậm nhạt có hợp lý không? Anh giỏi về kỹ thuật là anh phải tạo ra được những cái tương quan đấy. Nếu mà không có tương quan đấy thì nó đồng chất nó quay trở về gần giống tranh sơn dầu.
Artists mix natural ingredients to create colors, like eggshells to make white, or cinnabar, a toxic ore for red. In some cases, artists add leaves of silver, sometimes even gold, to create a gentle sheen. These substances can be one of the costliest parts of Sen Mai painting.
Gốc của cái thần sa chu sa nó là gốc thủy ngân, cho nên là một lạng của nó để vào tay nó chỉ được như quả trứng cút thôi mà cầm rất là nặng. Đấy, thế thì triệu vạc một cái gói con lên chẳng hạn, thế thì dùng nó rất là tốn kém về mặt nguyên liệu.
While the raw materials of the painting may be more expensive than many other styles, the skill and the work of the artist are what set the vinyl value. Along with the immense patience Sen Mai requires, each work is unique and unpredictable. That's because painters are never quite sure how the layers will resurface through sanding. This can either increase the value of the work or force an artist to start over.
Thế thì các họa sĩ sơn mài truyền thống thường là nếu mà kỹ thuật vững vàng, nắm được rồi phác thảo tốt thì khi mài ra thì chủ động được khoảng độ 80%. 80% cái ý tưởng của mình. Thế còn 20% còn lại là dành cho may rủi. Ngẫu nhiên. Có thể cái ngẫu nhiên đấy nó làm tranh đẹp hơn cái ý định ban đầu của mình rất nhiều. Nhưng cũng có lúc 20% ngẫu nhiên đấy nó không đạt yêu cầu của mình thì họa sĩ phải vẽ lại.
Painters must be careful to let each layer fully dry before sanding, otherwise colors or designs could be ruined. There's no set amount of time a layer takes to dry, as it largely depends on the weather that day.
Và cứ mỗi lần vẽ xong thì sơn ta vẽ bằng chất liệu truyền thống thì bao giờ cũng phải ủ. Nó có độ ẩm. Lý tưởng nhất là độ ẩm trong nhà vào khoảng độ 70-80% là sơn rất nhanh khô. Thế còn dày hanh là sơn không khô được. Đấy, lý do là cái độ ẩm của không khí nó là cái hơi nước của không khí, nó là cái chất xúc tác để cho các cái thành phần sơn nó liên kết với nhau tạo nên phản ứng khô của sơn. Nếu mà thuận lợi thì 1-2 ngày nó khô, mà nếu mà rời hanh chẳng hạn thì có khi phải ủ đến 3 ngày sơn nó mới khô. Thế thì để làm được một cái bức tranh sơn mài nó kéo dài hàng tháng.
After weeks of work, pieces are polished with coal powder, which creates the smooth surface and lasting shine of senmai. Artists have used lacquer for its glossy finish for thousands of years. One of its best-known applications is Japanese lacquerware, decorative pieces of furniture, boxes, and dinnerware. But in the early 20th century, Vietnamese artists developed an interest in lacquer painting and created a style unique to the world. Impressive as these works can be, the process is both costly and arduous. And that's why Phan Chinh Trung believes the future of this tradition will depend on finding more artists willing to learn it.
Để mà duy trì nó thì trước tiên là những cái người chỉ dựa vào mấy cái người họa sĩ mà đam mê cái nghề này thì không được, không giữ được. Mà vấn đề là phải phát triển. Cứ đợi cái truyền thống nó mất rồi mới lại đi tìm chỗ nọ, nguyền chỗ nọ, chỗ kia để phục hồi lại. Làm sao có được, đúng không? Một khi đã mất rồi thì làm sao nó đứt đoạn rồi.
Stone crab claws are one of the priciest seafoods you can buy. And depending on their size, a pound of claws at a restaurant can cost as much as $70. But catching these crabs is hard work. Strangely enough, fishers can only harvest the claws from the crabs, while the bodies must be returned to the ocean. So what makes these claws so coveted? And why are they so expensive? You can only fish for stone crab on the southeastern coast of the US, Cuba, the Bahamas, and Mexico. And it's Florida where more stone crabs are caught than anywhere else. These crustaceans are markedly more expensive than other popular crabs. A pound of claws can cost 2 times the price of Alaskan snow crab legs. Part of what makes these crabs so costly is the labor-intensive process of catching them.
There's a nice crab.
Ernie Piton Jr. has been commercially fishing for stone crabs for over 40 years. With limited time to harvest each year, his crew must start their days early, sailing out before the sun rises. The process begins with dropping traps down to the ocean floor.
This is probably the funnest part, you know? You get to be a little more physical, you know what I mean? It's a little bit of a rhythm thing going on here. It's like dancing mariachi.
But plucking these claws can be a dangerous process.
The claws on an adult crab can have as much as 9,000 pounds of pressure per square inch. With the enormous pressure that's exerted, they could actually pop a finger off at the joint.
These crabs, they have a mind of their own. You can easily get bit, you know, if you're not careful. I've only been bit maybe, say, 8 times in my career. Popped over 1 million claws in my day.
The crew leaves the traps in the water for about 2 weeks before they're pulled in by a rope. Then each one must be sorted thoroughly.
We come back in a couple of weeks and then got a couple in the trap. We're gonna pull them out. We're gonna pop their claws and hope for a good day.
Crews break off the claws quickly so they don't keep the crabs out of water for too long. But even if a trap is full of crabs, Kevin can't necessarily take every claw. The state requires all harvested claws to be at least 2 7/8 inches long. Crabbers can legally break off both claws if they meet the required size.
The ones that look smaller, we measure them on the gauge, like that one.
Crabs are one of few animals that can regenerate. When a crab loses a claw, or 2, it can grow each one back in time. On average, claws can take up to 3 years to grow large enough to harvest again, which is why the state requires that crabbers pay close attention to each claw's size. This ensures fishers don't remove one prematurely. But despite the claw's ability to regrow, some researchers have questioned the sustainability of this system. The Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission found that 46 to 82% of crabs died from the loss of 2 claws, while 23 to 59% died from the removal of 1. That's compared to just 12.8% of crabs that died when no claws were removed. Crabs can also only regrow a claw if the joint that linked it is left intact. Otherwise, they'll bleed to death. This makes the way these claws are broken all the more important for preserving the fishery's future. Hiring enough people to make the operation run smoothly is another reason for the high price of these claws. And then there's one other cost you'd never expect. Each trip requires 900 pounds of pig's feet for bait, and that's just about half of the total cost of fishing for the day.
Normal running cost to go stone crabbing a day is about $1,100 to leave the dock. Bait prices have gone up, fuel prices have gone up, the trap tag prices have gone up.
After 10 hours on the boat, Ernie's crew must boil and ice their catch as soon as they return. Otherwise, the claws won't stay fresh. They finish the day by weighing each claw, which ultimately sets the final value. Claws are sold in 4 sizes. At Billy's Stone Crab, restaurant prices range from $35 to $70 per pound.
We run about 4,000 pounds of stone crab through the restaurant each week. On a busy weekend, we sell 700 to 800 pounds of stone crab.
The most expensive order costs $140. The plate is made up of 4 7-ounce colossal claws, which yields just under 1 pound of crab meat. Fresh cooked claws sold on ice are less expensive, but even then, the mediums will cost you $29 per pound. Years ago, stone crabs weren't such valuable food. In the 1890s, they were nothing more than bycatch in spiny lobster traps. Fishers began to keep the crabs that fell into those traps, and by the late 20th century, the stone crab fishery had become one of the most valuable industries in Florida. Today, it's worth $30 million, and the prices of these claws aren't likely to drop anytime soon. Data from the FWC show the number of crabs caught each year has declined by 712,000 pounds. That's since peak harvest in the late 1990s. Many commercial harvesters have also started fishing farther offshore, pointing to a lesser number of crabs in the area. The FWC says both of these changes signify a threat of overfishing, and prices have gone up in order to keep the fishery profitable. To further protect the species' future, the FWC instated even stricter regulations last year. 2 changes include an increase in the minimum size of harvestable claws and cutting the fishing season short by 2 weeks. These limitations aren't likely to lower the cost of stone crab claws, but the goal is to help preserve them and keep Florida fishers busy for years to come. Ceylon cinnamon is native to just one region of the world, and producing it requires hours of delicate work. Even the most skilled workers can make only a few pounds of quills a day. 1 pound of cinnamon quills can cost $27. But not all spices labeled cinnamon are the Ceylon variety. Many in the Western market are actually cheaper types of cinnamon called cassia. So what makes Ceylon cinnamon so favorable? And why is it so expensive? Ceylon cinnamon is named after the Old British name for Sri Lanka, and it is often considered real cinnamon. It is made from the dried inner bark of a tree called Cinnamomum verum. Growing these trees is an investment. Farmers must wait 4 years after a tree is planted before they can begin harvesting. At harvest, workers break down the branches early in the morning when the bark is still moist. Ruwampura must continuously care for the trees throughout the year. Otherwise, the branches won't be suitable for making cinnamon at all.
ඉන්නේ කරන්න කියන්නේ දැන් ඒකේ ගහ වැඩක් නේ කරතිය විදිය මෝරලා පාට තියනවානේ ගහ ඇද්ද වෙලා තියනවානේ ඒව කපන්න ඕන. කෙලින් තියෙන එක තමයි ඉතුරු කරන්න ඕන. හොඳට කුරුඳු තියෙනවා නම් මාස 8න් අතට කපන්න පුළුවන් නැත්නම් අවුරුද්දට එකපාරයි.
The rigorous nature of this job has only just begun. Now peelers must do the delicate and essential work of stripping the inner bark of each branch by hand.
දැන් අපි ඉස්සෙල්ලා කුරුඳු කපාගෙන එනවා. ඊට පස්සේ ගැට පහින්න ඕන. ගැට පැහැලා ඊට පස්සේ කුරුඳු උද කුඩ අරින්න ඕන. ඊට පස්සේ අපි කරන්නේ මේ අරගෙන තලන්න ගත්තාම මේකෙන් මෙහෙම හොඳට හොඳට බුරුල් කරලා මේකෙන් තමයි බුරුල් කරන්නේ.
This is the most labor-intensive part of the process, and it's not as easy as simply shaving the outside of the bark, as you would the skin from a potato. To produce the most valuable cinnamon, the bark must be made extremely thin. The thinner the quills are, the more costly they will be. Ruwampura has spent 40 years mastering this skill. Soon after the bark is removed, each piece dries under the sun and curls up within a few minutes. After drying, the small pieces are stuffed inside a straight piece of bark, forming one 42-inch quill. By the end of a long day, workers will have only produced about 3 pounds of quills. Those then need to dry for 3 to 4 days before they're packed into bales and sent off to a separate facility. That's where they'll be graded and officially priced based on their width. P.D. Romanis & Sons buys bales of cinnamon from various peelers. At its facility, quills are graded over 10 scales. The most valuable quills are classified as alba. It takes a peeler 4 times longer to produce 1 kilogram of alba than to produce the same quantity of lower grades.
ඕනේ මේක මිල අධික වෙලා තියෙන ඇත්තට මේ ඔයගලට පේන්නේ නැති මේක පැන්සලක ආකාරයෙන් තමයි තියෙන්නේ කරන්න ඕනේ. ඒ කියන්නේ කුරුඳු ගහේ පොත්ත ගැලවුවාම පොත්ත අඟලට ඉරීමක්.
The leftover, smaller cuts are turned into ground cinnamon and make up the cheapest form. But even the most valuable quills are often confused with a more widely accessible and cheaper variety of cinnamon.
කුරුඳු වර්ගීකරණ අතර ප්‍රධාන අපේ තරගකාරී කුරුඳු වර්ගයේ ලෙස තියෙන්නේ චයිනා වලින් ඒ වගේ ඉන්දුනීසියාවෙන් වියට්නාමෙන් එන කාසියා කුරුඳු එක.
Cassia comes from another kind of cinnamon tree called Cinnamomum cassia, and it doesn't require as much time or effort to make. Cassia bark is hard and sturdy, so quills are made as one curled piece of bark without the fillings. Ceylon cinnamon, on the other hand, is tender and soft and needs those inner layers to prevent the quill from breaking.
ඒ මොකද මේ පතුරු අර කාසියා කුරුඳු වගේ නිකන් දුන්නොත් ඇත්තටම මේකේ වටිනාකමක් නැහැ. මොකද මේකේ වටිනාකම අයිත් තියෙන්නේ අපි මේ කූරු වශයෙන් නිෂ්පාදනය කරන නිසා.
Cassia is very fragrant and brown, whereas real cinnamon is paler with a milder flavor. Cassia also contains, on average, higher levels of coumarin, an organic compound that can cause liver damage if consumed in large amounts. This is why researchers say Ceylon cinnamon is ultimately the healthier option. But if you're buying cinnamon in the US, it can be hard to tell the difference between them. Part of the confusion between the two comes from the use of the label cinnamon. In the US, it is legal to label both Ceylon and Cassia cinnamon as cinnamon, while in the UK and other countries, Cassia must be labeled Cassia and cannot be classified simply as cinnamon. Regardless of what it's called in the US, consumers worldwide prefer the real thing. In 2018, Ceylon accounted for more global cinnamon revenue than any other variety. But even as demand is expected to grow through 2025, climate change poses a serious threat to cinnamon production. In recent years, Sri Lanka has experienced droughts over several months, and these long periods of dry weather can kill cinnamon trees, which need marshy, wet soil to survive. There's also a shortage of cinnamon peelers, another threat to production that's likely to drive up prices. This industry relies on experienced peelers who can practice the difficult work of making these quills over many years.
අනාගතය කියන්නේ දැන් මෙහෙම බාල පරම්පරාව මේකට යොමු වෙන්නේ නැහැ. ඒක දැන් අපේ ළමයි වුණත් කැමති නැහැ මේ වතු වලට තාම ඇවිල්ලත් නැහැ. දැන් අවුරුදු 18ක් වෙනවා. නිකම්වත් ඇවිල්ලා නැහැ. ඉතින් ඒගොල්ලෝ කැමති නැහැ මේවට මෙයා වෙන්න. ඉතින් අන්න ඒක තමයි තියෙන මේ අනාගතේ සුබ නැහැ වගේ පේනවා. ඉතින් අපිට පුළුවන් කාලේ ඉතින් අපිට කරද හැකි. ඒක තමයි තියෙන්නේ.
Poulet donkey cheese is the most expensive cheese in the world. Produced by only one farm in the world, Poulet will cost you about $600 for a single pound. Making it requires more time and effort than most other cheeses. You need over 6.5 gallons of donkey's milk just to make 1 kilogram of cheese. That's 2.5 times more than what you need to make mozzarella. So how does Poulet compare to other types of cheese? And why is it so expensive? Even in the diverse world of cheese, Poulet is unique. There's only one place in the world that makes it, and that's on this farm in the Zasavica Special Nature Reserve. Slobodan Simic founded the reserve 24 years ago in Serbia. It's one of just 3 areas in all of former Yugoslavia that protects a special endangered breed of Balkan donkey. Poulet is made with 60% donkey milk and 40% goat milk, and it requires months and many donkeys to produce it.
Sve je slučajno I ništa nije slučajno. Osnovna naša ideja kad su magarci u pitanju da tu vrstu koja je spala ispod 1000 jedinki u Srbiji spasemo. Tad smo rešili da napravim prvu farmu muznih magarica. Dakle, ovdje su, poenta je na muznim magaricama. Proizvode, a kad smo došli do 200 magarica, kad smo imali višak mleka, onda sam ja mislio da treba da pravimo I sir.
There are only about 20 donkeys that produce milk on the farm at a time. And even then, each one won't produce much. Each donkey is milked carefully by hand 3 times a day. If the farmers don't empty all of the milk, the donkeys won't continue making it.
Mi smo probali da muzemo I mašinski magarice, ali je to ispostavilo se nemoguće, zato što ona nije namenjena kao krava da daje mleko, nego samo pule sisa I zato kad se stavi muzni aparat, ona blokira I neće da da mleko.
Today, farmers care for 250 donkeys, but they can't always take milk from all of them. Similar to cows, a female donkey will only produce milk once it's had a baby, and each one carries a baby for a year and 2 weeks. Then farmers must wait another 3 months once the baby has taken milk for itself, before they can begin gathering their own to make cheese. They need 6.6 gallons of milk in total to make just 1 kilogram of cheese, and a donkey produces under 1 gallon of milk per day. That's far less than what comes from a cow, which can produce as much as 15 gallons of milk a day. Each donkey will only produce milk for 6 months. Then you must wait another year to collect milk from that same donkey again. Poulet is only sold on this farm and a few others the reserve partners with, another factor that ups the final value. The farm can produce between 50 and 70 kilograms of cheese a year, but Slobodan only ever sells about a third of that. And it's not just because of Poulet's staggering price. You couldn't legally buy Poulet cheese in some parts of the world even if you wanted to.
Stojke I pije se isključivo nekuvano to mleko, što je isto dodatni problem za plasiranje tog mleka u Evropsku uniju, jer nepasterizovano, nekuvano mleko se ne može prodavati u Evropskoj uniji. A ovo ako se pasterizuje, onda se izgube svi ti dragoceni sastojci I onda je to obična stvar koja nije vredna.
Technically, Poulet cheese can be produced with milk from any type of donkey, and therefore any farm that raises donkeys. But there's one major roadblock. Just having donkey's milk doesn't mean you have all you need to make this cheese. Poulet is made in a very specific way, using a recipe only Slobodan and one other person in the world knows. It's because donkey milk contains less fat than the milk of other animals, which means it holds less of the protein casein that allows many other cheeses to coagulate on their own. The recipe requires goat milk and a secret mix of additives and bacteria. This is what allows the milk to form curds, an essential stage of any cheese-making process. Without this, it wouldn't be possible to make Poulet at all.
Pa ne može da napravi niko, ne samo kod kuće, nego su poznati stručnjaci za mleko iz raznih zemalja pokušavali to da naprave I nisu uspeli. Zato što je ono što je tehnolog smislio, to su dodaci određenih bakterija I drugih supstanci koji uspeju da zgrušaju to mleko, koje inače malo ima to kazeina koji služi za zgrušavanje mleka I onda su mnogi probali, ali niko nije uspeo da napravi.
The cheese is finally placed into 50-gram molds to age for a few days. Once removed from the molds, it's set in another room to age for at least a month more. The final product is crumbly and soft with a rich flavor.
Pravo, jedinstveno I posebno.
The cost of preserving the donkey species is another element to keep in mind when considering Poulet's huge value. Slobodan must maintain the land, buy food for the donkeys, and hire workers to care for them. In a year, he spends about $100,000 just to keep the farm running. And unless producing poulet becomes easier, or someone else in the world discovers how to make it, nothing is likely to bring down the price of this incredibly rare Serbian cheese. High-quality black opal can cost over $10,000 per carat, making it one of the world's most expensive gemstones. But mining black opal isn't easy. After investing tens of thousands of dollars, a miner might not find a single gem. So what makes black opal so hard to find? And why is it so expensive? Black opal is one of the most enchanting stones in the world, sought after for its seemingly infinite display of colors. Compared to common opal, which is usually one color, black opal exhibits many different colors, contrasted by a dark body tone.
It's simply the most stunning gemstone on the planet. It's just remarkably beautiful. You can put the thing away for a week, pick it out and look at it, and you can still see things inside it that you've never ever seen before.
Opal is found in several parts of the world, including Ethiopia, Brazil, and Mexico. But over 90% of the world's opal comes from Australia. And a lot of the black opal is found here, at Lightning Ridge. It's located on the edge of the outback, with a population of just over 2,000 people. Miners have been searching for opal here for over 100 years. But even for experts, finding black opal isn't easy.
If you were to start mining tomorrow, and once you learn mining skills, and I've been mining for 40 years, would be an equal chance. Just because there's nothing really that can tell you, oh, there is opal in that piece of ground, or there's not opal in that piece of ground.
Miners start by drilling a vertical shaft in an area that they think contains opal. Then they must clear out an underground room large enough to start digging at the rock.
The basic idea of mining is basically extract the opal clay out from the ground, put it onto a truck. I take the truck to a puddling site in town and check if there's opal in that.
The equipment needed to mine and the cost to register your claim can be extremely expensive.
Really, if you wanted to rock up here and be serious, you'd probably need 150 grand to 100 grand in your pocket to have a go.
But buying the equipment doesn't guarantee that miners will find black opal.
Some people will go, oh, there's definitely money there because next door they got $200,000 and there was a bit of colour drilled up here, it's got to have come over, and there's a whole epic story of why there should be opal there. And you go and dig there and it's not.
Miners search for areas in the rock with trace amounts of opal. They follow these spots, called knobbies, hoping to find more opal deeper in the rock.
You'll keep going in a straight line till the trace runs out, and then come back where there was trace in the wall, go left and right, and then if that stops, then you come back and do it again, and you can come back and do it again. So you've always got that in the back of your head, you know, when do I leave, how long do I stay, have I stayed too long, I'm wasting time, I'm wasting money from my next patch. There's a knobby there. When you're in a really good pocket, see how these knobbies are sitting close like that together? They can be like a cluster, like a bunch of grapes. They're all sitting around each other and they've all got colour. Hear that? See that sound? It's like glass. So you get that big one out. There we go. Yep. Doesn't have any value. Common black opal.
Opal is formed when silica-rich groundwater hardens in rock over millions of years. Large silica spheres within the stone diffract light, creating vibrant colors. That play of color makes each gem unique. But for miners like Frederick, digging for black opal is a gamble.
The human factor is the biggest factor in finding opal. If you've got a piggy bank of $10,000 or $20,000, and then all of a sudden in 1 month or 2 months you've blown all of that budget because you've had breakdowns and you've had things occur that you didn't think of, and then you go, well, I'm $20,000 down, what do I do here? I've been full-time mining for about over 45 years, and quite often I say to myself, how did you do it? You know, how did you survive that long, making it your only job? I've done I've done good, not great. I haven't been in the millions. Haven't been up there in the fantasy pocket, you know.
Once rough opal is extracted and processed from the dirt, it has to be cut and polished. This is when the real value of the gem is determined.
A black opal can vary from starting at maybe $1,000 a carat for run-of-your-mill and going right up to tens of thousands of dollars for that really exquisite top quality. The main stone is 241 carats. A few $1,000s a carat wouldn't be unreasonable.
So a lot of money.
A lot of money.
The color, brightness, and patterns can all influence the price of black opal.
What you're looking for in the best quality opal is a black stone with really bright colour and as much red and other colours as possible. So the most valuable black opal of all is a really bright red stone on a very black base and that just glows. And you don't see them very often at all.
That lack of supply is a huge driver for the price of black opal.
We can barely keep up with the demand at the moment. As soon as you find a gem quality stone, you know you've got a buyer for it.
Between 2005 and 2006, approximately $30 million of opal was mined at Lightning Ridge. And for fans of black opal, there's simply nothing else like it.
It's just a magic stone, and when I came to Lightning Ridge, just the beauty of it captivated me.
In 2017, a single violin bow sold at auction for $690,000. You can buy a beginner's bow for less than $50, but a top-rate professional bow can often cost thousands of dollars. A bow like this is completely handcrafted by skilled artisans, and just one can take an entire week to make. Even the most subtle differences in the way a bow is made will change how well it plays. So why would someone pay so much for a bow? And what makes it so expensive? Violin bows are far more complex than they appear, and so much of what sets the value of a bow comes down to the artisan who makes it.
L'archet idéal, comme l'archet c'est vraiment le prolongement du bras, l'archet idéal ne doit pas faire de césure entre le bras et ensuite l'arrivée sur l'instrument. Ça doit être vraiment le prolongement, ça doit être quelque chose, si le musicien décide de faire une attaque très rapide, ça doit immédiatement se répercuter quand il joue.
Sandrine Raffan has spent the last 30 years mastering this craft at her family shop. To begin building a bow, she needs raw materials from specific regions of the world. The most essential are Pernambuco wood from Brazil and horsehair from Mongolia that cost $900 a pound. Typically, horses in cold climates have thicker and stronger hair, which won't break as easily while playing.
Ce qui est important, c'est d'avoir du crin naturellement blanc. Pas du crin décoloré, parce que le crin décoloré, c'est comme un cheveu, ça devient plus fragile. Ce qu'il faut savoir, c'est que sur le crin, il y a des petites écailles. Donc à force de frotter et de jouer, les petites écailles s'en vont. Donc le musicien va remettre de la colophane pour redonner du mordant. Mais au bout d'un moment, on se retrouve sur un crin qui est lisse et complètement encrassé de colophane.
Because of this wear and tear, even professional ones must be re-haired every 3 months, which is a large part of a bowmaker's restoration work. So much of this process relies on the natural instinct of a bowmaker.
Il y a des personnes qui vont compter les crins. Nous, on marche au feeling. On va vraiment faire ça au feeling en fonction de la largeur du passant. La nervosité de la baguette, c'est un archet assez nerveux où on peut se permettre de mettre un petit peu plus de crin justement pour que ça réponde bien. Si l'archet est souple, on va justement en enlever un petit peu.
By nervous, Sandrine refers to bows that are too stiff for a musician to maintain balance. They must be sturdy, yet flexible enough to move fluidly.
C'est vrai que c'est un bois qui est assez dense, nerveux, mais en même temps en gardant des grandes qualités élastiques, parce que l'archet doit être, tout en étant nerveux, doit avoir quand même une certaine souplesse. Donc on ne peut pas faire un archet en ébène, par exemple, ça n'irait pas, ce serait beaucoup trop nerveux, ce serait injouable.
Every small alteration by the bow maker, from carving the head of the stick to tweaking the curve of the bow, determines how well a bow will play and ultimately sets the final value.
Je dirais, comme n'importe quel métier manuel de précision, on travaille au dixième de millimètre, donc faut être juste essayer d'être constant dans son travail, d'être précis.
So even as ideal as this wood is for bows, it's up to the bow maker to determine that the shape of the stick is just right. Then Sandrine must consider the age of the wood, another time-consuming element of the process.
Souvent les archets d'entrée de gamme vont être des archets faits machine avec du bois pas sec. Et donc ces archets, au bout de 6 mois à 1 an, vont commencer à tourner dans tous les sens. Par l'essence du bois, par le vieillissement du bois, c'est comme un vin. Un vieux vin a eu le temps de mûrir, en fait, tout simplement. Même si on utilise du bois vieux, on ne peut pas comparer un archet moderne avec même du bois de 20-30 ans avec un archet qui a plus d'un siècle, voire plus. Donc voilà.
Sandrine has restored bows made by master artisans from hundreds of years ago. These bows only remain playable with routine repairs, but because of their rarity and centuries-old wood, just one of them can be worth tens, even hundreds of thousands of dollars. Whether a bow is ancient or modern, each one appeals to different people, and it's up to the musician to decide whether the price and quality of sound are worth it.
On parle souvent de mariage à 3, c'est-à-dire qu'on parle de mariage avec l'archet, avec le musicien, et ensuite avec l'instrument. C'est-à-dire que pour le même musicien, le même instrument, vous pouvez donner 3, 4, 5 archets différents, le son sera complètement différent.
Like Sandrine, many esteemed artisans have studied this craft in France, where prominent French bow makers like François-Xavier Tourt developed the modern bow. Bow makers don't typically go to school as you would with violin making. Instead, many must train as an apprentice for 3 years under a master bow maker. That tradition continues for Sandrine today, as she shows the next generation how to make bows by hand.
En soi, chaque archet est différent et nous apprend et voilà, et on apprend tous les jours. Et je dois dire, au bout de 30 ans, il n'y a pas un matin où je me lève. Je peux me lever des fois fatiguée, mais en tout cas, jamais je me lève en me disant « mince, il faut que j'aille travailler ».
This is standard sea salt. But after 30 days, it'll become this. High-quality bamboo salt costs almost $100 for an 8.5-ounce jar, making it the most expensive salt in the world. So what is bamboo salt used for? And why is it so expensive? For hundreds of years, Koreans have used bamboo salt for cooking and as a form of traditional medicine. It's made by placing sea salt inside of bamboo and roasting it at a high temperature. The goal is to infuse the salt with minerals from the bamboo and to remove any impurities. But the premium compared to other types of salt is steep. 9 times roasted bamboo salt, sometimes referred to as purple bamboo salt, can cost over 10 times the price of pink Himalayan salt. Most of that cost comes from the labor-intensive process. Every single step is done by hand.
처음 천일염을 대나무통에 넣어서 맨 마지막 9번째 용융을 해서 완제품 포장이 될 때까지 한 달에서 한 달 45일 정도, 50일 정도, 이 정도 기간이 소요되고 있습니다.
The process starts by cutting 3-year-old bamboo into uniform trunks, leaving one side closed as a container for the salt. Sea salt from the west coast of Korea is densely packed by hand into the bamboo. Workers load filled bamboo onto a cart and push it into a kiln. Traditionally, only pine logs are used. This process takes around 12 to 14 hours. Baking everything at over 800 degrees Celsius burns away the bamboo, leaving a column of salt. But the process has only just begun.
그다음에 그것을 소금 기둥을 다시 분쇄해서 대나무 채우는 것을 2번. 그것을 반복해서 하는 것이 8번을 하는 거죠.
The 9th and final roast is the hottest, at over 1,000 degrees Celsius. It's fired in a special kiln and operated by an expert. Shin Tae-jun has been making bamboo salt for over 20 years. That experience is extremely important because any error at this stage could result in wasting a month of work. At this temperature, the salt and bamboo completely melt and drain into a mold. After a few days of cooling, a blackened, rock-like structure remains. This is 9 times roasted bamboo salt. Workers carefully break this down by hand, trying not to waste any material. After a month of work, it's ready to be packaged and sold.
천일염을 대나무통에 넣고 굽게 되면은 천일염 속에 있는 안 좋은 것들, 뭐 미세 플라스틱이라든지 천일염 속에 안 좋은 것들을 많이 순화시키는 과정을 거치게 되고요. 그리고 대나무가 타면서 대나무 기름이 나오게 됩니다. 그 대나무 기름을 소금이 자꾸 흡수해서 그 대나무 속에 있는 좋은 성분들을 소금이 점점 농축하게 되는 거고요.
The final price varies depending on where you buy it and what form it's in. But 9 times roasted bamboo salt doesn't come cheap.
죽염을 이제 맨 마지막 9번째까지 구워진 죽염 기준으로 말씀을 드리면 키로당 한 20만 원 정도에서 한 25만 원 선 이 정도 가격을 생각하시면 좋을 것 같습니다. 죽염이 비싼 거는 한국 사람들도 동일하게 인지를 하고 있는 거고요. 그 가치를 알기 때문에 죽염이 비싸더라도 믿고 또 믿고 구입한다고 생각합니다.
The health benefits of food have always played an important role in Korean culture. For centuries, bamboo salt baked 2 to 3 times has been used in traditional Korean medicine. But in the 20th century, the 9 times roasting process was developed. Manufacturers say this process is the lowest toxicity and highest mineral content. Today, it's used for cooking, toothpaste, soap, and various remedies.
일단은 죽염도 소금이다 보니까 짠맛은 있고요. 짜면서도 죽염만의 또 독특한 맛이 있어요. 그 대나무 속에 있는 좋은 성분들을 소금이 자꾸 흡수하면서 죽염의 독특한 계란 노른자 맛 같은 맛이 많이 구워진 걸수록 점점 진해지게 되고요. 그다음에 쓴맛은 없고 계란 노른자 같은 그런 맛이 점점.
Proponents of bamboo salt say that it can help with everything from digestion to oral health, skincare, and inflammation, and that it even has anti-cancer effects. The proposed medical benefits have likely helped it maintain its high price, but there hasn't been enough scientific study to fully back up all of these claims. Studies have shown that bamboo salt contains higher levels of iron, potassium, and calcium compared to regular sea salt, and that it could improve your immune system. But these beneficial minerals constitute only a small percentage. The majority of bamboo salt is sodium chloride. Even with lower toxicity, it's unclear how potent the health benefits are. In 2016, the WHO wrote in a report that the composition of specialty salts poses no toxicological risks, but does not offer any relevant nutritional benefits either. The full benefits of bamboo salt compared to sea salt have yet to be extensively researched. But despite that, bamboo salt continues to be popular. Even in the high-end world of jewelry, Cuban link chains are a symbol of luxury. This 18-karat gold chain is worth $27,000, and some of the most valuable chains will cost 10 times that. Making a single chain requires the skill of more than 5 experienced jewelers and can take over 12 hours. So how exactly are Cuban link chains made? And is that what makes them so expensive?
Somebody had to literally take 14 hours of their day running hot steel through machinery to then turn it by hand, to then file it by hand, to then polish it by hand. You're not just wearing a chain, you're wearing somebody's blood, sweat, and tears and passion around your neck.
The origin of the Cuban link chain is tough to pinpoint, but it likely didn't start in Cuba. It was a quintessential part of hip-hop style in the 70s and 80s, and grew in popularity as hip-hop became more mainstream in the US. But not all Cuban link chains are created equal. Many Cuban link chains are made by machines in countries like the US, Italy, and China, but the authentic and most expensive ones are made by hand at just a few shops in Miami.
When you move into the higher end of Cuban link chains, which you get into the $50,000, $80,000, $100,000 chains, those have to be handmade. One, because of the attention to detail. The file, the tight links.
It's like going to a Ferrari dealer. You could buy a Ferrari off the lot, or you could have it made to how you want. This is a custom build.
A chain like this goes through 30 manual and time-consuming stages.
The skills come from your ability and practice and knowledge. Worldwide, I can't tell you an exact number. Within South Florida, there's a handful of people, literally a handful of people that could do this.
Not only is this process incredibly labor-intensive, it's also dangerous. Chino and his crew work with 1,000-degree flames to melt down the gold and form it into a bar.
You definitely got to be paying attention to what you're doing in this job. One mess up, you're gonna hurt yourself. There has been people that have lost fingers in this business.
That bar passes through a rolling machine as many as 12 times just to make it thinner. Each of the 9 jewelers at Gold Fever Miami has a specific job. At the stretch bench, one jeweler can spend over an hour just stretching the wire to length.
This isn't dirt, it's actual gold. If you look at my hands, you'll see the flakes of gold on them.
This wire then gets curled around a copper rod to form the shape for the links. For smaller chains, a drill gets the job done, but thicker ones need the strength of 2 jewelers. The most crucial stage of the process comes next. It also requires the most skill.
The soldering is the most intricate part of what you're doing. Essentially what you're doing is you're heating up gold. And right before it begins to break down and melt, you're introducing solder.
Solder is another type of metal that's used to permanently close each link.
So it's the balance of applying the right amount of flame with the right amount of technique to when those 2 metals meet, that solder melts and fuses into the gold. So if you left too long, the whole thing is just liquid gold. If done way too early, the solder won't melt properly and you won't get that fusion between the links.
You can't mess that up, or you're gonna create gaps in the chain. And you can't be scared to stop and just do it all over again.
It's no secret the price of gold plays a part in determining the cost of these chains. An ounce of gold costs $1,700 today. But even the most high-end Cuban links are mixed with something else. Gold itself is a very soft material, typically too soft to be made into jewelry on its own. It has to be alloyed with other metals. White gold, for example, is an alloy of gold made of white metals like silver, zinc, and nickel. Those metals make the gold more pliable, allowing it to be stretched and twisted during the jewelry making process, but they can be especially difficult to work with. One small movement can make all the difference. In rare cases with white gold, this can happen.
This is the reason why it costs so much. If any one of these links break, you then have to take it back to the soldering table, resolder it, and bring it back here and turn it again.
Once the links are properly turned and tightened, the chain will lie flat. A jeweler must then file down the chain so that each side is level and looks exactly the same.
And here is where the passion of the jeweler comes into hand to how beautiful he can make that shape.
But these Cuban links in particular didn't become so sought after or so valuable until recently. Google Trends shows that searches for Cuban link chains began taking off in 2012. And in the last 2 years, Gold Fever Miami sales have grown 100 times over. The shop used to sell $2,000 worth of Cuban links a month. That number is now over $200,000.
Whether you're the most famous or you're just starting off, to legitimize yourself as a rapper, you have to have jewelry. And if you have jewelry, you have a Miami Cuban link chain.
In 2012, Jay-Z wore one of the priciest Cuban links made at the time, worth $200,000. A year later, Daddy Yankee debuted his 10-kilo Cuban link chain in a music video. And there's even more traction in the music industry now.
They're so intertwined with pop culture, more specifically hip hop and reggaeton. Just about every song that has a music video will have a rapper with a Miami Cuban link chain.
It's become, in a way, like a status symbol. We have customers that want to match their Rolexes to their chains.
These versions are often decked out with diamonds, which naturally makes them pricier. But Gus doesn't see demand slowing for chains like this or the more modest ones.
Right now, as of March of 2021, we are pumping anywhere from 10 to 15 kilos in 5 days, so per 5 weeks. And we still can't keep up with the demand. We still have a wait time of 5 to 7 weeks.
This, coupled with the steep price of gold, means prices likely won't drop anytime soon. This is the most expensive fish in Japan. In January 2018, a kilogram of these baby eels cost around $35,000. That's more than bluefin tuna, and almost as much as the price of gold at the time. But catching these eels is just the beginning. It can take a year of work until they're large enough to be sold. So what makes these eels so popular? And why are they so expensive? People in Japan have eaten eel for thousands of years. Restaurants like this can sell 40 to 50 tons of eel each year. Japanese eel, or Anguilla japonica, can be found across East Asia. But overfishing and changing habitats have caused a huge decline in eel populations. Since 1980, the global catch of eel has declined by more than 75%, which has had a huge effect on price.
近年はとにかくその一年一年のうなぎの仕入れの価格差が非常にすごくて、平気で去年の3倍、また来年3分の1。
Unlike other types of fishing, the majority of eels are raised, not caught as adults. Young eels called glass eels are caught in the wild and raised on farms like this. No farms have been able to efficiently breed the eels in captivity, so farmers depend on the catch of young eels to make a profit.
ですね、この1年で育てている量は、年によっても違いますけど、だいたい30トンぐらいですね。15万匹か16万匹ぐらいです。
Raising this many eels requires constant attention. Michio has been working as an eel farmer for almost 40 years.
うなぎの養殖に関してですけども、うなぎは決して強いとは思いませんし、何かそういった病気とか事故とかトラブルがあったらもう本当に 90% 以上のブドウマリ率は維持できません。そういった日々の管理というのが非常に重要になってきています。
After the cost of the eels themselves, feeding them is the most expensive part. 2 to 3 times a day, workers feed eels this. It's a mixture of fish meal, wheat, soybean meal, and fish oil.
15万匹確実に食べてくれるように努力しながら小さいうちに食べさせるっていうところが難しいですね。最初はそこから始まりますので、その時期は非常に気を使いますね。もうその一つの池が何か事故とか何かあればもう全部終わってしまいますので。
After 6 to 12 months of work, eels are big enough to be sold. Workers unload the eels and sort them by size to determine where they'll be sold. Experienced workers can quickly tell the difference just by feel. Some of these eels will end up at restaurants like Serugaya, which has been serving eel for over 150 years. That high demand is part of the reason young eels are so expensive. The final dish is called kabayaki. It may look simple, but preparing it takes years to master.
うなぎのことわざっていうのがありまして、よく言われるのは串打ち3年、裂き8年、焼きは一生。
Workers prepare eel live to maintain freshness, but this makes handling much more difficult. Workers remove the bones and cut eels to the proper size for the skewers.
焼きは一生、一生っていうことは要するに死ぬまでかかるってことですけれども。
Eel has to be constantly monitored while it's cooking to achieve even grilling.
やはり硬すぎず柔らかすぎず。
Chefs steam, then grill each eel 3 times, dipping it into sauce between each grilling.
実際の食べる美味しさ、それを両立させるっていうことが蓋を開けた時の見栄えが美しい。
Kabayaki presented in a lacquer box with rice is called unaju. It can cost up to $91 depending on the price of adult eel. If prices are too high, restaurants struggle to make a profit.
うなぎの資源量に関してはやはり我々うなぎ屋さんみんな死活問題ですから非常にそれは皆さん考えていると思います。僕も当然そうですし。
In Japan, eels are eaten year-round, but consumption peaks in the summer, and it's become a big part of some local economies. But the high demand has caused concern. In 2014, Japanese eels were classified as endangered. And because of low domestic catch, the majority of eels eaten in Japan are imported from China and Taiwan.
やはり必要量よりも少ないと高騰してくる。高騰してきた時に生産者が、どういうふうな利益というをそれのバランスをどう取っていくかというのが非常に課題が大きいということになっています今。
There have been efforts to improve the eel population, like regulating fishing, releasing adult eels back into the water, and researching how to hatch eels in farms. But the future of Japanese eels remains unclear. Japanese chef's knives are world-renowned for their unique design and durability, and just one can cost you over $900. From heating and hammering the metal, to sharpening the knife's edge and polishing the final blade. These are only a few of the skills a Japanese artisan spends a lifetime learning to master. So what makes these knives so coveted? And why are they so expensive?
Made った人の魂っていうか、使った人の魂もその包丁にこもるんですね。これはうちのお母さんが使ってた包丁だというのが日本の包丁じゃないかなと思います。
Terukazu has spent 37 years crafting chef's knives at his family's factory in Echizen. Each one goes through 100 production stages. It's a process that requires over 10 years of practice.
本当に安いものですと今でもスーパーマーケットで、2000円ぐらいで売ってる包丁もあります。でも僕らの作ってる包丁はいまだに僕のおじいさんが作った包丁を研いでくれって持ってくる場合があるんです。もうびっくりしますけど、それぐらい長く使えるんですね。
Compared to popular European chef's knives, Japanese blades are lighter and sharper, allowing for more precise cuts. On the low end, most Takamura blades cost a couple $100, but custom-made pieces can sell for 15 times that. One of the most expensive knives produced by the shop sold for $6,900.
まず包丁にとって一番大事なことは、大まかに言って3つあります。まずいい材料。 次に、いい焼き入れとか熱処理ですね。鍛造熱処理で最後にいい研ぎ、この3つがないとどれ一つ欠けていても絶対いい包丁にはならない。
Takamura Hamono was one of the first knife makers to use a certain kind of stainless steel called high-speed powdered steel. It was originally designed for power tools, like saws and drills, because of its durability and strength, two qualities Japanese chef's knives are known for today. Once the metal is cut, it's heated in an electric oven to harden and strengthen the blade. Then the hammering begins. At this point, the artisan relies on experience and instinct to guide them in producing a blade of ideal strength and thinness. Hammering leaves behind circular indents, something knife makers in the past typically polished away. But 60 years ago, Terukazu's father and his colleagues discovered the benefit of knives with a textured surface like this.
さっきみたいにこう鍛造をトントントントントンとしてもう表面結構デコボコになりますよね。でそのままではダメなんできれいに磨いて、普通はきれいに焼き入れをしてで研いで磨いて、その方が物がくっつかなかったと。じゃがいもであるとか人参であるとかピタッとくっついてなかなか取れないのに、デコボコだったらポロポロポロポロ取れると。
This hammered finish, called tuchime, allowed chefs to chop ingredients quickly and more efficiently. It also added a beautiful aesthetic to each blade, another element highly valued in Japanese knives.
今世界中でも土目の入った包丁ってやってますよね。
But a Japanese chef's knife wouldn't be nearly as valuable without a supremely sharp edge. An artisan presses the blade against a rough grindstone made of natural rock, a sharpening material you'll only see used in Japan. This step distinguishes an artisan's skill and ultimately sets a knife's final value.
手にかかる微妙な力とあと音と感覚で研いでいくんですけども、そこは一丁ずつやっぱり違ってくるし、砥石の状態も一丁研いだら変わってくるんですね。一丁ずつ変わってくる。叩き3年、叩きっていうんですね。作業こっちの手で叩く。叩き3年で研ぎは一生ずっと勉強だと。
It takes one full day to sharpen the blade and another full day to secure and polish the handle. The final knife is totally unique, each with its own distinct balance, thickness, and design.
あと包丁って自分の料理人の方がよく言うんですけど、自分の手の延長になってほしい。でそのためにやっぱりそういった工夫ですかね。やっぱりまずバランスがもう自分のここの一番包丁の先端が自分がどこを当てたいかと、当てたいところにマッと持っていけると。指の先のような扱いができる包丁。
Several of the world's best chefs use Takamura's knives, from René Redzepi at Noma to Massimo Bottura at Osteria Francescana. Another one of those chefs is Masakazu Fuji. He uses Takamura's knives to prepare fish at his restaurant in Fuku.
おそらくアーティストのライブでメインのギターがなんだとかっていう風になっても、サブであったり、ギターテックがいたりしてやる人間っていうのは、演奏する人間っていうのはそれに集中できる。でそれを高村さんが今してくれているっていうような感じですね。この切ったところから表面に光沢が出てる。でこれって切れない包丁でやったら全くこういうのは出てこない。でそれをストレスなく切ると、こういう感じで切ったところから今にももう溢れようとする。でも止まってる。でそれを口の中で歯で噛んだら出る。
Echizen has been the center of high-quality knife making since blacksmiths began crafting chef's knives here 700 years ago. And today the city is internationally recognized for its cutlery production. But before knives, artisans made swords, another valuable trade in Japanese culture.
ところが日本の刀って細いですよね。なぜ折れないかっていうと、真ん中に柔らかい鉄が入ってるんです。そして外側に硬い鋼で覆っていると、二重構造になってるんで折れないんですね。で、日本の包丁はその、技術を生かして真ん中に鋼を入れて両側から柔らかい鉄でくるむ。
Despite dedicating decades to this craft, Terukazu and his brothers weren't always set on becoming master knife makers.
弟もその一番下の弟も3人ともこの仕事をやってるんですけども、この仕事をやりたいとか、これ僕なんかだったらロック歌手になりたいとか、弟だったらオートバイのレーサーになりたいとか、やっぱり、ある程度の年代が来て本当に自分の今までの僕が育ってきたこの、背景とかそういったあと自分がうちが作ってるこの包丁とかをこう見ていくとやっぱり俺はこれをやるべきなんやな、これをやらなあかんねやなというのと、やっぱこれをやりたいなという気持ちがやっぱり出てくるので。
Professional chef or not, getting your hands on one of Takemoto's knives could take years. With that kind of wait time, coupled with the decades of training required to master this craft, it's likely these pieces will remain costly for years to come.
そうですね、やっぱり、本当にこういう価値のある、もちろん時間もかかるわけですから、まあ本当に申し訳ないんですけどもやっぱり、2年半とかそれくらい待っていただいた方も、おられます。でもやっぱり使って本当にそれができた時に待っててよかったと、もうこれ使ったら他の包丁はもう全然使えないとか、まあ本当に嬉しいことですけど。
Cashews grow in select tropical climates around the world, from the bottom of a hanging fruit like this. Just 1 kilogram of cashews can cost $10 wholesale. That's over 7 times as much as peanuts. And in the US, retail prices for whole cashews can reach $15 per pound. But without intensive, precise processing, these nuts wouldn't be edible at all. So how exactly are cashews processed? And is this what makes them so expensive? In 2017, the world ate 770,000 metric tons of cashews. They're one of the most popular and valuable nuts in the world, worth over $6 billion today. Cashews grow in tropical locations like India, Vietnam, Ivory Coast, and here in Sri Lanka. The trees are a member of the same family as poison ivy, and like poison ivy, cashew plants contain a toxin called urushiol. It's found in the plant itself and the brown oil inside a nut's shell. It can cause burns, itches, and blisters, which is why unprocessed cashews are considered dangerous to eat or touch. It's also why they require more rigorous processing than other nuts.
වෙළඳ පොලේ තියෙන කජු සාමාන්‍ය විදිහට හිතන්නේ මේ නිකම් වෙනවා කියලානේ. නෑ මේක හෙන්න සංකීර්ණ වැඩක්.
Each fruit grows just one shelled nut called a drupe, which workers separate by hand. The nuts must then dry under the sun to help draw out some of the shell's caustic liquid. The most difficult and dangerous step is splitting open the nut, since toxic oil still coats the drupes. Cashews are brittle, so factories used to do this step manually to ensure machines wouldn't break the nuts. But doing this by hand has frequently raised issues within the industry. NGOs have called out some factories for overworking employees and putting workers at risk of burning themselves if they can't afford to buy gloves for protection. Today, machines are advanced enough to crack the shells cleanly, keeping the majority of nuts intact and helping minimize risks to workers.
එතකොට දැන් එක එක වැඩවලට මිනිස්සුયો ගිහිල්ලා සේවක පිරිස අඩුයි. එතකොට අපි අර වගේ අපේ ඕඩර් වලට කජු මද දෙනවා නම් අපිට සේවකයෝ ඕන ගොඩක්. ඒකේ තමයි අපි මැෂින් වලින් කපන්නේ ඒක තමයි වෙනස. අපි අතින් තලා ගද්දි හිතන්නකෝ අපි දවසකට කජු කිලෝ 20ක් විතර අපි කරන්නේ කියලා. අපි මැෂින් එකේ කරද්දි කජු කිලෝ 40ක් විතර අපිට කරගන්න පුළුවන්.
After a machine splits open the shells, the next two crucial stages totally depend on workers who have to do them by hand. The nuts are roasted to ensure, again, that the toxic liquid inside is destroyed. The next stage is particularly tedious, as it relies entirely on handiwork. Workers must peel off the husk, or the dry outer covering that surrounds each nut, because it's high in tannins and could irritate your throat. Removing it is a skill one masters with practice. Experienced workers deskin only about 2.5 kilograms of cashews each night. This step is not only difficult, but also has the biggest impact on price.
ඒක මෙහෙමයි පළපුරුද්ද තියෙන්න ඕන. ඒක සාමාන්‍යයෙන් දැන් හිතන්නකෝ අලුතෙන් පුද්ගලයෙක් එනවා කියලා අපි ළඟට වැඩ. එයාට ওই ප්‍රමිතියට කරන්න අමාරුයි. අමාරුයි කියන්නේ එයා එක්ක කජු කඩනවා.
Cashews are graded by several features, like color, weight, and condition. Large whole nuts are most valuable.
මේකේ මිල කජු වල මිල වැඩිම ගාන තමයි ගෙඩි මදේක. ඒකේ අනිත් එක තමයි මේක. මේකට අපි කියමු පියලි කියලා. අනිත් එක කෑලි එක. සාමාන්‍යයෙන් යන මිල 2500 නම් පියලි වල රුපියල් 50ක් විතර අඩු වෙනවා. කෑලි වල රුපියල් 2000කට විතර කෑලි බහිනවා.
Because cashews can only be harvested once a year, growers like Laharu save a portion of the nuts in stock so that they can continue making a profit in the months ahead. But it comes at a steep cost. Just stocking the nuts costs Laharu more than $65,000 each year.
කජු ඒ කියන්නේ දැන් කජු එක කාලයකටනේ තියෙන්නේ. ඔන්න ඔය පොල් වගේ දැන් පොල් වගේ මාසෙන් මාසෙට කජු නෑනේ. කජු තියෙන්නේ අවුරුද්දට එකපාරයි කජු හැදෙන්නේ. ඒක අපි ලොකු මුදලක් දීලා ස්ටොක් කරගන්න ඕන. ඉතින් එතකොට ඔය කජු කියන දේ අර නිතර නිතර කජු වැටුණා නම් කජු වලට ඔච්චර මේ ඉල්ලුමක් එන්නේ මේ වෙළඳ පොලේ. අර අවුරුද්දකට එකපාරක් වැටෙන නිසා කජු මිලයි කොහොමද?
This causes prices to fluctuate a bit year-round. In December, Laharu's supply has decreased, so prices typically increase. But it also depends on each country's supply chain. While Sri Lanka processes and sells many of its own cashews domestically, other countries export much of what they grow. It's likely that many of the cashews you buy in the US or Europe were grown in Africa, processed in Vietnam or India, and finally exported to the Western market. Africa produces half of the world's supply of cashews. Ivory Coast, for example, produced about 730,000 metric tons of raw cashews in 2019, but it exported over 90% of that. This is because Ivory Coast and other African countries still don't have a robust processing industry. Ivory Coast plans to expand domestic processing by 2024, but without it, cashews are significantly less valuable. In 2018, the export price of cashews processed in India and exported to Europe was 250% higher than the price paid to Ivory Coast farmers. Vietnam, on the other hand, was one of the first countries to invest in automation, making it a key location for processing cashews. Today, Vietnam is the largest cashew exporter in the world. In just the first 3 months of 2021, the country exported over 108,000 tons of cashews. Automation has also lessened the need to hire workers, which is a reason many factories in India and Sri Lanka still process manually.
පාරම්පරික වගේ තියෙනවා. කලින් ඉඳලම කරගෙන ගිය ව්‍යාපාර තියෙනවා. ගොඩක් තැන්වල කරනවා. සෑහෙන පිරිසක් පවුල් 200-300ක් විතර වගේ ඉතින් මේ වැඩ කරනවා.
By hand or machine, processing cashews is no easy task, and the world's climate crisis could make it even harder. A 2013 report on the climate's impact on cashews shows unseasonal rains and heavy dew can impact the quality and quantity of the nuts. Just this year, La Haru's harvest came late because of it.
මේ සැරේ පරක්කුයි අර වැස්සෙන්ද දලු දාන්න පරක්කු වුණා. වැස්සොත් කාරියක් නැති අර මල් හේදුනහම අඩු වෙනවා කඩු. ඔව් දැන් හොඳටම වැටෙන කාලේ කිලෝ 10ක් විතර දවසට එක්ක අහු වෙනවා. දැන් මේ දවස් මගේ කඩු හිගයි කියලා. දැන් මේ දවස්වල කඩු කිලෝ 300ක් 400ක් ඔය වගේ තමයි.
Amidst climate challenges, cashews continue to be popular. Healthy eating trends are key to driving demand, along with the versatility of the cashew itself, another reason the nut remains so valuable. Whether used as a snack, cooking paste, or an alternative to milk or butter, cashews have many applications around the world. Researchers predict the market will grow to $7 billion by 2025. And although cashews are currently cheaper than they've been in recent years, demand is likely to drive prices higher in the future. This is said to be the world's oldest leather-making tradition. It's called vegetable tanning, and it's a process that has been perfected over generations here in Tuscany. Artisans spend 4 to 6 weeks perfecting each piece that they touch. Vegetable tanned leather is considered higher quality and will last longer than synthetically treated leather. It takes at least 28 times longer to make, which is part of the reason why vegetable tanned leather only makes up roughly 10% of all leather available today. It can also cost around 3 times more than the cheaper version. So how exactly is vegetable tanned leather made? And why is it so expensive? Vegetable tanning is said to date back to roughly 6,000 BCE, when people living in early civilizations sought a way to make animal skins resistant to weather and decay. Genuine vegetable tanned leather uses these natural tanning agents from sources like quebracho, chestnut, or mimosa trees. The substances, known as tannins, will naturally bind to the collagen proteins in a hide, turning it into leather as we know it. Just as they do for trees, the tannins protect hides being turned into leather from bacteria and other substances, which gives leather the longevity and versatility that it's known for. Until the 19th century, vegetable tanning was the only way to make leather. But today, 90% of all leather goods are made using chrome or mineral tanning, a leather-making process that uses synthetic tannins. On first glance, consumers may think this softer leather is of higher quality, but it won't have the same lifespan. When the hides arrive at the tannery, they soak in water for 24 hours to remove the salt that kept them preserved on their journey.
La materia prima utilizzata è fondamentalmente la pelle bovina, quindi un recupero del mondo della produzione della carne per l'alimentazione umana. Sono pelli che arrivano, possono arrivare da tutto il mondo, principalmente arrivano dall'Europa per il nostro settore.
Then they are dehaired and limed, a process that prepares the skins to receive the tanning substances. Leather makers add the hides, along with the tannins, to this large wooden rotating vessel known as a drum. The hides stay here for 3 to 7 weeks to tan. Here is where you can begin to see the differences between vegetable tanned leather and its modern-day alternative, chrome tanning, where hides sit in a drum with water and synthetic extracts for only a single day. Just this difference in production time adds to the price of vegetable tanned leather. Once the hides have been removed from the drums, skilled artisans inspect each piece. Depending on the final product, the leather can be retanned, dyed, or greased. This process is known as fat liquoring. These 3 procedures can be done to adjust the elasticity, softness, or color of the leather. Whether they happen depends on the vision of the artisan.
Dopo la fase dell'ingrasso appunto si procede ad asciugare la pelle e una volta asciutta abbiamo la pelle, diciamo, che è prodotta. Da lì poi si può andare con tutta una serie di passaggi meccanici, si può andare ad affinare la caratteristica che appunto il conciatore vuol dare al suo articolo.
The tanned hides dry on hooks for several days in a special environment-controlled room. The humidity and temperature in the room have to be just right. This is something that can't be learned quickly and shows the skill of these leather makers. The time of the year, the weather, and the humidity in the factory itself can all play a part in adjusting for this perfect temperature. If any hide is over-dried, it must be taken back to the drums and reconditioned. You can tell vegetable tanned leather apart from mineral tanned leather by its two defining qualities. First, it changes color in the light and develops a rich patina. A patina is the shine that develops over time on a leather product that makes it unique. Second, vegetable tanned leather will become more supple with age. These qualities are made possible by the natural properties of the leather. Vegetable tanning leaves the hides in an organic state that lets them age like skin. With synthetically treated leather, each piece is the same. That's by design. Leather produced with vegetable tanning, however, will garner the most beautiful patina as it is worn or used. No two pieces will age the same. After it's dry, the hide goes to the staking machine, where small hammers repeatedly pound the leather to make it softer. Sometimes the leather mills for several hours in a dry drum, giving it a special natural grain. In the end, the leather is trimmed, measured, and packaged. Finished products are valued for their variations, which can add to the price. Artisans take pride in the natural markings and differences that prove the leather's authenticity.
Parliamo di una piccola nicchia di mercato che è una particolarità unica. C'è sempre stato il detto l'acqua va in amore. Va in amore, l'acqua cambiava nella falda. Quando cambia l'acqua nella falda dovevamo compensare cambiando la ricetta e questo chi lo diceva? Nessuno, lo diceva l'esperienza accumulata in anni, secoli di conciatura. Queste sono delle differenze chiaramente macroscopiche.
All vegetable tanned leather from Tuscany must meet a set of specific standards for the consortium to verify it as authentic. Tanneries must use all natural, raw materials and ensure that no animal is killed for its skin. And in the end, the most important mission of vegetable tanneries in Tuscany is to keep a cultural craft alive, no matter the cost.
È un po' come la cucina toscana, la ribollita ognuno ha la sua ricetta e così le concerie, gli artigiani come siamo noi, ognuno ha proprio la sua ricetta, che viene poi tramandata anche.
With every shaving and small incision, master artisans turn these trunks of wood into 32 hand-carved chess pieces. You can pick up a plastic set for $20, but a wooden set certified for the World Chess Championship costs $500. Much of the value of a high-quality set comes down to how well just one piece is made. The knight. There are less than 10 people who are trusted to carve the knights for the official World Chess Championship sets. So how are these chessmen made? And why are they so expensive? At this factory in Amritsar, India, artisans carve the pieces for the official World Chess Championship sets. And the factory produces only 250 of them each year. Artisans train over 4 to 5 months, learning to masterfully shape each figure. These small blocks of boxwood were once large trunks, dried for 3 to 6 months, cut down, and shaped to the necessary size. Each block is attached to a lathe, which turns the block rapidly before artisans begin to carve. Artisans use particular steel tools, called cutters, designed to make the proper cuts and overall shape of a chessman. Once the cutter makes contact, it immediately changes the wood. and any slight misstep could ruin the final shape of the piece. No piece is more difficult to produce than the knight. While other pieces are carved in just a few minutes, a single knight takes 2 hours to produce. Less than 10 people are trained to craft knights for these championship sets.
सर ये घोड़ा बनाने ਨੂੰ 10 ਸਾਲ ਹੋ ਗਏ सर ये बड़ी मेहनत से काम सिखाया ਜਾਂਦਾ 5-6 ਸਾਲ ਹੋ ਗਏ ਕੰਮ ਸਿੱਖਣ ਦਾ ਟਾਈਮ ਲੱਗਾ
Compare that to the 4 to 5 months it takes an artisan to learn how to carve the other chess pieces. But unlike these other chessmen, the knight isn't an abstract representation of a medieval figure. It's designed to look like a realistic horse head. It's the most detailed of all the pieces. Each carving is intentional, from the hair on a knight's tail to the curve of its neck.
ਇਹਦਾ ਚੀਜ਼ ਗਲਾ ਬਣਾਉਣ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਪੂਰੀ ਗਲਾਈ ਕਰਨ ਵਾਸਤੇ ਵੀ ਟਾਈਮ ਲੱਗਦਾ ਇਹ ਵਾਲੀ ਸਾਈਡਾਂ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਤੇ ਵੀ ਟਾਈਮ ਲੱਗਦਾ
The quality of the final piece largely depends on the skill of the artisan. A top quality knight must be completely symmetrical.
ਪੇ ਪੂਰਾ ਰੇਖਮਾਲ ਵੀ ਬਿਲਕੁਲ ਠੀਕ ਲਾਇਆ ਕੰਨ ਵੀ ਬਰਾਬਰ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ ਨਾਸਾਂ ਵੀ ਠੀਕ ਹੈਗੀਆਂ ਵਾ ਇਹ ਚੀਜ਼ ਵੀ ਬਿਲਕੁਲ ਬਰਾਬਰ ਹੈਗੀ ਹੈ ਇਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਚਲੋ ਇਹ ਆ ਇਹ ਬਰਾਬਰ ਦੇ ਜਾਨੀ ਕਿ ਇੱਕ ਨਾ ਇੱਕ ਘੋੜਾ ਹਰ ਇੱਕ ਚੀਜ਼ ਮਿਲਦੀ ਪਈ ਹੈ ਜਿੰਨਾ ਜਾਨੀ ਕਿ ਦੇਖ ਲਿਓ
But it's just as important that all 4 knights in the set look totally uniform. Otherwise, the set altogether won't be nearly as valuable. According to the House of Staunton, a large manufacturer of chess sets, a set of finely carved knights can represent up to 50% of the total cost of the chessman. The other chessmen have specific height and width requirements, designed by architect Daniel Whale. The king must be the tallest, at 95 millimeters, and have a base that's 39 millimeters wide, the largest of them all. The pieces have defining characteristics, like the king's crown or the refined jewel at the top of the queen's coronet. These distinct features require more time and effort for the carver. The king's crown in a championship set should have 8 small cuts and be slightly rounded along the edges. Compare this king to the king of a regular set, which has a much simpler, straight-edge design. Pieces with even simpler designs than that, like a rook, take these artisans 7 times longer to produce compared to regular chess sets.
If the chessman is like of a championship set, then we are only able to make 25 to 30 kings in a day because it's a very special design. If we are talking about making chessmen for tournament players which are used in vast quantities, then a carver is even able to make 200 to 250 chess kings in a day.
But the design of these chess pieces isn't solely aesthetic. It can actually affect the outcome of a game. Each piece must be the correct height, the king being the tallest, followed by the queen, bishop, knight, rook, and pawn. The detailed features are also essential, by lowering the chances a player will make a mistake.
If you see in medieval ages, the chessmen were not really in a good form. The chessmen were round, some of them were spiral, the knights were not even carved in the shape of a knight. In this form you can see the kings properly, the knight very distinguished, the bishop has a mitre cut, the queen's is very sharp. So you can easily distinguish between all the 6 pieces.
This is known as the Staunton design, the only style allowed in international competition today. Pieces used in the championship match have an electronic coil, making it possible to track and broadcast each player's move. A full set with this tracking component costs about $700 more. The weight of each piece, along with the felt bottom, are 2 more significant factors that affect the game. Both make the chessmen easier to use, effectively upping their value.
If the pieces are properly weighted, then they do not fall while you are moving the pieces on the boards, and also it gives a very nice and a special feel to a chessman.
Some chessmen must be dyed black and dried for 10 days. All of the pieces are buffed and polished 3 times before they're assessed for quality. Chess has been played for over 1,000 years, with some form of the game first appearing in India around the 6th century. Over the past 2 centuries, high-level competitions have drawn international interest in the game. Today, tournaments continue to keep the game popular, as do displays of these competitions in the media. The release of the limited series The Queen's Gambit on Netflix sent sales of chess sets skyrocketing in November 2020. And although this demand is a positive for the industry, it also poses a challenge to chess producers like Aditya.
It is very difficult to find good quality skilled carvers for manufacturing chessmen. And even after 4 to 5 months, 6 months, we don't know if the carver would be good enough to carve a nice chessmen. So nobody wants to spend so much of time and realize that he was not able to carve the desired quality of chessmen.
Without enough experienced carvers, these sets could become more difficult to produce. And it's fair to expect that $500 sets like these, and similarly hand-carved ones, could get even pricier in the future.